Bri, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited about all of our topics today. Accountability for me, just as a side note, is a big word that I am resonating with lately and taking ownership of our actions and behavior. And wow, what a world we would be in if everyone took accountability for their own actions.
Huh. It is a big word. It's become a buzzword this year where a lot of people are like accountability, accountability. But it's one of those words like I take very seriously in all facets of how you could view accountability. But we need it in every area of life and beyond.
I'm going through a bit of I don't even want to say a season, just like a couple months of my life where my reactions and my behavior are not aligned with who I am. I guess the word would be triggered. And a lot of like deep trauma and self worth issues are coming up. And obviously that causes a reaction. And now I'm in the process of, oh, right, I got to take accountability for that behavior now. And I think that's the first and best step that we could do is recognize that we've done wrong and make it clear kind of what we're going to do to change. And what more can you ask for, you know?
Right. And even those behaviors that you're talking about that have been what you explain as out of character are our bodies telling us that it's time to release. You've got something in there that's pent up that it's telling you, stop holding this in. It's like trying to keep a pin in a grenade that's already been pulled. You're ready to explode. And there's nothing wrong with release. There's nothing wrong with getting it out. But like you said, when you come back to reality, there's accountability and then just learning from those lessons. So no shame in letting it out.
It's you have that hangover after of like, shit, I was a shitty person. And there's no going back. What's done is done.
Yeah. And most situations when we do things that, even if it's out of character or not, when we do things that impact other people and particularly that may hurt other people, we can say sorry for them, but that doesn't mean that it completely fixes the situation. And in a lot of instances, we can choose our actions, but we cannot choose our consequences. So we can communicate that we're holding ourselves accountable, but that doesn't mean everybody's going to forgive you in the process. But maybe some of those bridges were meant to be burned, and unfortunately it happened in the manner that it did.
Yeah, well, I will watch how it all plays out in my own life. Topics for a solo episode for sure that I'll probably record this week.
Oh yeah, it could probably be a little cathartic to get it out. Even if you don't post it right away, wait until you're through the storm and then say, well, I recorded this in the storm and now I'm sharing it with you. Yeah.
It's funny that you say that because I've kind of went back and forth on debating if I want to like go to therapy and stuff. And for me, I'm finding other modalities of getting the same value that I probably would from therapy. I'm doing like this online course where it's kind of like doing like shadow work, if you're familiar with that. But then it's funny that you bring up the podcast because there's been times where I've went through stuff in my life and the nature of my podcast is going through struggles in life. And I just hit record and talked it all out the same way as I would, whether to a friend or a therapist. And I was able to kind of figure it out in my mind. And I find speaking it out loud, you can process the emotions a little bit more instead of just keeping them in your head, whether it's like writing or speaking it out loud. Once like you get it out and like on paper or in air, I'm like, yeah, I feel a lot better. So great solo episode to come, I'm sure.
I'm here for it.
Oh my God. Well, let me ask you this. Obviously, you're an accountability coach, but since the episode and the interview is about you, what are you taking accountability for lately?
Oh, that's a big question. I don't think
You're like, shit, don't turn this mirror back on me.
I don't think anybody ever flips it on me like that. I am being accountable to myself, being accountable to really making sure that I'm only giving energy to the things that are going to be beneficial. A lot of people like to say, oh, well, self-preservation and people are selfish and this, that, and third, but we come in the world naked and alone. We die alone. Not naked, but alone. And essentially, you have to navigate life for you. Nobody else is going to live this life for you. So I'm in the process, which by time this episode gets released, I will have already resigned. But I think when we spoke last, I was telling you I was like in the process of, trying to get back into the workforce and thinking that might be a way, things that slowed down in business. And I was like, I've got a family and I've got things that I'm responsible for. So like, I have to be accountable that I can't just do what I want to do and I need to make ends meet. But then I was miserable, like, and not because of the job specifically. What I was doing wasn't horrible. Who I was working with, they weren't horrible. It just, when your passion's not there in something, or excuse me, not passion, because I don't like to use that word as much because it's now a buzzword as well. But when your heart is not in something, your mind is not in something, your productivity suffers. And I just feel that if I'm going to be doing something, I need to do it at 100%. And right now, that means making sure that I'm investing in myself and investing in the things that I believe in myself about. So accountability was, I said it has to work or it has to work. And when it didn't appear to work, I tried to go back to what I know. And I was quickly thrusted back out like, no, this is not where you are. So like I said, I will actually be submitting my resignation, and I struggled with it because I have a reputation that I want to maintain. I, do support the organization and the work that they do. However, I'm on a journey to create a legacy for my family, for myself, for my daughter, and most importantly for myself. So being able to be accountable to my own goals and not putting things aside because I'm trying to help someone else, or saying yes to projects that I know really are going to overexert me, or engaging with people who I'm like, every time I get around you, I have an attitude after, and you're just kind of like draining my energy. Really just being cognizant of those things. So accountability for me looks like not apologizing to myself for how other people perceive my journey to self-care and peace. Perception is the root of misconception, and the signal that I'm sending out may not be the signal that you receive. And all I can do is put it out there how I'm putting it out there, and it's on you to interpret that how you do. So really being accountable to making a full effort in my business the way I would for an employer, knowing that my value is not at the dollar amount that is set by corporations.
So many avenues to go. What I admire the most about that, you as a mom, it's so easy as a mom to put yourself in the back burner, put yourself in the back seat and make decisions that revolve around safety and security for your kids. I'm not a mom, but I mean, I do that sometimes for the people I care about, but because deep down, I have to suffer this short-term pain for long-term gain that inevitably will benefit myself and my daughter. And that you're a little bit in between a rock and a hard place, because you're giving up that security, but deep down that it's going to be worth it. It takes a lot of self-preservation and confidence to get to a place to jump off that cliff.
Yeah, and this is not actually the first time I'm jumping off the cliff. So now I know I can stick the landing.
You are a cliff jumper by
like what I will say is that accountability is also going towards coming out of survival mode.
Yep.
For a long time, people just in general, not just me, have been stuck in survival mode, which looks like I've got to make ends meet. I got to make sure I'm working the 9 to 5, just barely getting by for a lot of people. They say you're supposed to have at least 30% of your income is supposed to go towards rent. But the reality is 70% of most people's income goes towards their rent, and 30% is for the rest of the bills and everything else, with nothing left for yourself. And that's because we're continuing to allow corporations to put a dollar amount on our value. And really, our value is priceless, but we're the determinants of what that value is going to be agreed upon. And we continue to agree to things that are less than favorable terms, and continuing to agree to things that are not realistically providing a good quality of life. So I rather do bad all by myself and step out on faith and jump off that cliff, for the sake of, this analogy, and say, hey, like, I know I can stick the landing. Things will be hard, but it can't be harder than being in a place where you feel undervalued. So really being strategic and intentional about not trying to survive anymore, but really finding avenues to thrive.
Yeah.
And that's only going to come with fulfillment. And are you familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
I am.
Okay, so I love the hierarchy. You can use it in just about any form or fashion when you're speaking or making a point, but I use it today for the top of the pyramid that Maslow believes most people don't actually achieve, which is self-actualization. And that's because a lot of people get stuck in the lower layers of the pyramid. I like to think of the pyramid as cement. And if you're building a foundation and there's an air bubble or even just the slightest hole in that foundation there, what happens is you can continue to build. You can go past love and belongingness to the next stages of the hierarchy, but eventually there's going to be mayhem that comes, like the State Farm commercial. And it's going to be a big rainstorm that's going to get a little bit of water right in that little dot that you did not decide to go back and fill in. And what's going to happen is that entire structure is going to crack and crumble because you didn't fill in that hole. Well, very early in my life, I crashed and burned. I was 16 and pregnant. I was homeless. I was into everything under the sun that you could think of that's adverse for a teenager to get into. But that crashing and burning early helped me to go back really and fill in those holes, so that at a very young age, I can get to this stage of self-actualization where it's not about me. It's about achieving generativity. It's about what happens if I hang up this laptop with you right now and I go get in the car and, God forbid, I get into an accident and I don't make it out. What have I done today? And every intentional movement, every intentional breath that I took to make my life better, make somebody else's life better. If I die, I had a conversation with my daughter the other day telling her, listen, our brains are assets, and assets that we have been taught to undervalue. And when our brains cease thought, that's when we die. And if we don't get those things out there right now, they'll die with us. Imagine if Edison died without expressing his thoughts. Imagine if Dr. Martin Luther King died without expressing his thoughts, or Mahatma Gandhi, or all these change agents that we have seen throughout history. That's all been in their brain, and that's all been things that they've done that were leaps of faith, stepping out when people called them crazy. But that crazy led us from dark to light, led us from suffrage to freedom. So if we really put that value back in ourselves and step out on faith, like, man, listen, there's nothing that we can't do. So I'm excited. I should feel like crazy or down or something.
No.
But like, like, I feel like that's like the common like thing to do, but no, like this t-shirt that I'm wearing is actually my nonprofit organization, Resilient Roses Respite. And I branded myself a long time ago. I realized that I am a corporation. So I'm going to set the value and not just look to hire people, but look to create a system and a structure of cessation that allows for leadership development, and particularly youth leadership development. So I'm happy.
Let me ask you this before I jump into your story of how you got here. Why do you think we're so stifled to be change agents? Because all of us have something in us that the world is just dying for us to stand up for and speak up about. So why do you think we're so stifled?
Generational curses. It's oppression. And I don't even mean to smile when I say this, but it's a topic that is
You're
like the
smiling because
buzzword.
you're just like this. Like, I don't understand. Like,
yeah, it's a mind over matter thing. It's mindset. Yes. Honestly, a lot of people don't realize that slavery took place not just physically, but mentally, socially, and emotionally. Which that's 3 different categories outside of the physical category that I'm listing there. Mentally, we were oppressed. We weren't allowed to read, and I'm speaking specifically to America. We weren't allowed to read. We weren't allowed to write. We weren't allowed to gain knowledge or learn. That's mental. And emotionally, we had fathers that were snatched away from families, children that were taken away from parents to go into slavery. That's emotional. Then socially, we were inept. We didn't have anything to build off of. And what we did have, they stripped it away from us. Culture, food, religion. They forced religion on us. They forced food on us. They forced culture. They forced language. So when you think about these things, it's mental oppression that It takes a lot of people a lot of time to change that paradigm. What they learned for 20 years of their life, it's not going to change in one motivational speech or one person that something happens to when a protest breaks out around the world. It's going to take people actively getting engaged to these things, but like really starting our kids off young with awareness, so that by the time they get to the age to make the change, they already know what issues they're standing firm on, and they've got a backpack half full. A lot of people are starting off with a backpack half empty, and they've got social media and fillers that are being added into it that have no substance, that now are making the bags look puffed up when in reality they're empty. So we've got
Don't get me started.
Yeah, we got to fill people back up with the stuff that really matters.
Right. I want to bring everyone back to where your story began. You were 16, pregnant, and homeless.
Yeah.
People are listening to you speak now and they're like, sorry, what? Like, how does someone go from those circumstances handed to them to speaking like this? And the first thing I want to say, again, it's a lot of it's mindset. It's taking accountability for your situation. It's like, yeah, I was handed this situation, but it's up to me. I can control my destiny. I sense that you're a big believer of that.
Oh yeah. I mean, your current situation is never going to be your final destination. Where I am now, I won't be in 2 minutes.
Precisely. Well, I hope you're still here.
But realistically, it's all about mindset. Even when I was 16 and pregnant, and I had a lot of people that were proponents of abortion and were like, you still got a full life ahead of you. And I was like, okay.
What stopped you from going that route? Because I know when we talked last, like you didn't have any family support, like you were in it alone.
Well, my mom has always been there. So
okay, right. But she just couldn't financially help you out, right?
No, she could.
No. What was it?
So
remind me of the story.
Kid. Look, I was a badass kid. Let's just cut the shit and eat the food, right?
So, I'm not surprised.
I've always been a rebel, and that rebellious spirit that used to get me into all kinds of trouble now gets me into good trouble. The mouth that used to get me into trouble in school now gets me into good trouble in places and spaces. So really, have you seen Kanye West's documentary?
Not yet. Tell me about it.
Oh my goodness, you gotta go watch it. So I wasn't like a huge Kanye fan before this, and please forgive me, I'll get back to my topic, but I wasn't a huge Kanye fan before this, but he kind of made me fall in love with him after this documentary. There's a power in storytelling. And what you see, or what I gathered most out of it, is that his biggest fan was always his mom. She breathed life into this guy. And I mean, he thought he was unstoppable and knew it. He didn't think, he knew he was unstoppable because she told him, you're unstoppable. And I've had the same experience with my mom. I faced a lot of rejection and traumatic incidents with my father that led to more of the rebellious outbreaks. My mom was also end-stage renal disease. She's got diagnosed with kidney failure when I was 5 years old. So that's something that I've gone through. And as I got older, grasped a better understanding of it, and, was kind of getting in trouble and understanding the stress that I was putting on her. We kind of sat down as mom and daughter and made a decision that it would be better for me to move with my dad after some significant trouble that I had gotten into in school in that area. I got with my dad, and within 3 months time or less, that turned into a domestic violence situation. And within 30 days or less of that, I ended up homeless and pregnant.
Why didn't you go back to your mom's house?
Oh, she begged me. At that
but point you were like, I'm doing this on my own.
I made my bed at that point and I had laid in it. I had already kind of screwed up what I did down south. This was Georgia that I came from back to Massachusetts. And the shot that I had, which was plenty of opportunities. My mother, by any means, I didn't grow up poor. I was at least middle class, upper middle at times, lower middle relationally, depending on the area you're in. And I was a pretty spoiled kid for the most part. I had an upbringing that was pretty decent, but we can't negate the traumas of emotional and social damage. A lot of that emotional damage started, I hate to say it, but daddy issues, and not because I'm somebody who's like, oh, I'm whining and crying about it. And, I even forgive him for his ignorance in these scenarios. However, I had to come to a place of understanding that my peace wasn't going to be leveraged based off of relationships with people. Don't allow people to have leverage over you based on how they're connected to you. So, mom, dad, sister, brother, daughter, if she gets old enough and starts doing too much crazy stuff, I'm gonna be like, deuces to you too, just because you've got to protect your peace. But going back to why I didn't go back with my mom, accountability. I made my bed, I laid in it, as well as the reasons that I left still existed. You know, there was still trouble in the area that she lived in. If I went back, not like it was a horrible area, but I had gotten into some things that I was just like, I don't need to go backwards into that environment. And once you get a certain level of freedom, it's kind of like what I'm dealing with right now with this job. Once you get a certain level of freedom, you can't really resort back. It's like what you said at the beginning, we get spoiled, we get used to certain pleasantries, and then we're not going to go backwards. Like you just don't go backwards. So also there was a certain level of freedom that came with not being under my mother's rules, who I highly respected, where I wasn't just going to break them, but I was already breaking them, and like to go back and continue to break them would have just been worse. So very quickly after leaving my father's house, my mom made arrangements for me to move in with some family. I appointed them as a temporary guardian after revoking my father's guardianship due to the domestic violence incident. And then I was also finding sexuality at that time too. So
of course,
my mom's a minister, so that just
you've already broken all the rules.
All of them.
Oh my goodness.
At this point, you know, I was just like, it's up from here. So very quickly after the domestic incident with my father, I moved out. My mother made the arrangements for me to stay with family. And then I ended up pregnant. I ended up into crime and just other things that I wasn't going to disrespect my mother further like that and bring it back into her house. So I went on this journey of just like kind of trying to find my way. I ended up homeless until I was probably about 18 or 19. I went into shelter when I think I had just turned 17. My daughter was a few months old, maybe like 10 or 11 months old. And from there, some of the structure that was provided to me in the shelter, even though I still bucked the system, I was still very rebellious. I was terminated from 2 shelters due to one. One was for fighting because you're young and you're dumb and you do stuff. The other,
you think you're invincible. I mean, you are at that age.
It's the infallibility stage. You know, you think it won't happen.
No fucks.
Absolutely, literally. So then I got to the second shelter, and I didn't fight in this shelter like the traditional fist fighting way. I fought with words, in a sense of I started to advocate for myself because it was more than 20 miles outside of my home community, which was now Brockton. And they didn't like that. One of the clinical directors there picked my daughter up by her arm one day. And I pretty much said to her, listen, you do it again and we're going to have a problem. I didn't get the I'm going to report you part out, but like we're going to have an issue. Yes. She deemed that as a threat. Well, it was. And you know, no, it was a promise that we're going to have a problem. So from there,
semantics.
So the day that I actually got the approval from the like appeal that I put in, they decided to terminate me instead of just transferring me. So on paper, it looks like I was terminated. I like to tell the whole story, but I really successfully advocated to be moved back to my home community. But again, that abortion talk that was happening, I knew that I wasn't going to go that route because I had already screwed so many things up. I weighed out like health wise, like what if I do this and I'm never able to have kids and just all these different things. Plus maybe I was searching for love at the time, who knows, but whatever it was, I knew that I was going to take care of this kid. I knew that I was going to do what needed to be done in a way that even shocked my mom, who like completely kept her house in Georgia, got an apartment in Massachusetts once my daughter was born and stayed for 6 months to make sure we were stable. That was because I almost died giving birth. I had severe preeclampsia. My blood pressure was 172 over 121. And my daughter was born 2 months early at 2 pounds, 12 ounces. So she stayed in the hospital for 36 days, which I was a poor homeless teen traveling back and forth on public transit to, you know, see her and just all different types of things that at no point through that process did I like stop and go, oh my God, I'm going through so many ebbs. I'm never going to glow.
I literally didn't have the time.
No.
And I think that's what I love about your personality and your story and your strength is you were always focused on the next step. You never, ever, from what I gather from you, played the victim card. You always took accountability for your situation and always knew that you were going to come out the other side. It just seemed like you just had this inner confidence.
Yeah. And that comes back to Kanye West's story. My mom's always made sure that I knew that like my brain is an asset. She's always made sure that like I know I can do whatever I put my mind to. Plan first, because proper preparation prevents poor performance. But if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So I've gotten instilled with all of these little rhymes and reasons about building character, building my core values. And those things are something that I stand on. And, you know, I'm human. I'm not perfect in any of those things. But, you know, if I take too much time to stop and go, well, this happened and have a pity party, I get nowhere. So, you know, what I have learned now, because those are some of the ebbs, we see some of the glow now, where I ebb in today's day, because you're never going to stop ebbing, right?
Literally, I have like a daily one.
Yeah. Where I ebb in today's day is really having to understand that even how I was operating then wasn't the best strategy.
Why do you
Because
say that?
that was like almost like that survival mode that I was telling you about, which is flight or fight or freeze. Now they've incorporated into stress responses. It was a stress response. So cortisol is good to be released in your brain for a short while, because now it gives you the ability to act quickly. It actually stops your stomach from being super hungry so that you can move longer and faster and, you know, reserve your energy. And it allows you to fight or flight or freeze if you need to. But what it also does is prolonged use of cortisol in your body actually starts to deteriorate at your body. And it starts to make you act impulsively in times where you should be acting rationally. And too much of anything is not good. So for a long time, like I said, I was in survival mode. It was just on to the next, on to the next, on to the next, which worked until there was nothing else to survive from. Now I was just surviving for myself. So now I had to kick into a different gear, which was a transition, something that was uncomfortable. And again, this process of me going from starting entrepreneurship before the pandemic, getting hit with the pandemic, continuing business through the pandemic, then thinking after the pandemic, let me go back to work and see how I find my way in there. And then now realizing like, no, you took a leap of faith and stay to your path, stay focused. Follow one course until successful is my acronym for focus. And now I'm following one course until successful. And that course is Bri's course. Coach Bri is building the bridge to what will look like a better life, not just for me, but for my daughter and for my namesake and for the generations to come when I die. I want to be talked about in categories with Martin Luther King, with Rosa Parks, with Mahatma Gandhi, with Jay-Z, with all the people who have created legacies beyond the skill set that they had. Jay-Z's no longer just music, he's a mogul. You know what I mean? Mahatma Gandhi is one of the most influential people in the world because he was able to move nations and he was poor all his life. You know, you have Martin Luther King that used his voice to advocate and motivate and get people to take action. Those are the things that I'm doing. And that's why I continue to glow, because when I ebb, I know there is always going to be a glow. It's like a rainbow. When it rains, it's going to shine after. And you just got to stay there long enough to keep chipping away at the mines and not stop 3 feet from gold.
I love that you just said the word rainbow, because the things that I've been going through in the last few weeks, I've been constantly asking, you know, when you like tell the universe, like, show me a sign, and you almost come up with like a word or something, or like, show me a butterfly and I'll know everything's going to be okay. Mine's rainbow. I'm glad you just said rainbow. So funny.
Well, you see, people get put in your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And it looks like today
And that's my quote as well. I say that quote a lot.
I really love it.
This is really funny. I'm like in the moment right now, just like you're throwing me off from my list of questions right now. So you were obviously homeless during the ages of 16 and 18. I feel, and tell me if I'm wrong, I feel like that breeds a level of resiliency that not many of us will ever experience.
It can.
Yeah.
Because
or do you think it could breed a complete opposite?
So everything has two sides. I like to think of things like a pyramid, right? So everything has a good side and a bad side. And then you have the bottom line, which is communication, right? And when you think about it, the bad side of things is bitter, good side of things is better. And the only way that I'm able to be on the side of resilience and being better is I. That's the only difference between the two words. Bitter, B-I-T-T-E-R, better, B-E-T-T-E-R. But the only way you get that pyramid to connect it's through that bottom line of communication. And that's communication with yourself first. You have to communicate the things that are bothering you. Like, even if you're just like feeling crazy and like talking to yourself in your head, that's fine. You're not crazy. Communicate like, ooh, that shit just bothered me. Yeah. And Kurt Faustin is a gentleman within my region that speaks and advocates about mental health. And he posted something today that really resonated with me, specifically when it comes down to me getting ready to move forward with this resignation. And he said that if something bothers you for more than 24 hours, say something about it in 48 hours. And it just made sense. Like, if I'm thinking about something for 24 whole hours, that means it's bothering me. I might even dream about it. So that means now I need to advocate for myself and communicate to that person the bottom line, or I'm going to be bitter over here because I never said anything, or I can be better and help this person to be better because now I told them that thing that's going to help them to communicate better or help them to, realize perception or whatever. So I really think that when it comes down to any situation, being resilient is a choice. Do you want to be a rubber band and allow yourself to stretch and understand what your limits are so you don't pop? Or do you want to continue to pile things on, pop, and then be bitter that you pop? Because the rubber band can be melted back together once it's popped.
Right. So true.
So it's how you look at things.
Yes. Thank you. I think that is such a key point, because you and I could go through the same traumas in the exact same situation and have a very different outcome based on how we choose to look at it. Mm-hmm. And I mean, you can be in the same argument with someone and one could leave totally distraught and the other could leave thinking, okay, that was healthy. I think we're going to move forward from this.
Right.
And it was the exact same conversation.
How do we know? Because communication is the bottom line, but there are so many pieces of communication. So this is what I motivationally speak about.
I'll tell you, I can tell you what I do, but you go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm listening. I've done a lot of talking. So you tell me what you do.
What I do is one thing that's helped for me, especially when I'm communicating, maybe after disagreement or like two people aren't seeing eye to eye. I do two things. I repeat back to them what I think they're saying and just say, am I clear on this? And I also ask them the same. I want to double check to see if they've heard everything I've said or how they're interpreting it. So I ask them, okay, based on everything I just said, how do you think I feel? Like, repeat it back to me. And the same goes is after an argument, if you're apologizing, what I like to do that I find is very effective is I say to them, when I put myself in your shoes, this is how I think you probably felt in that situation. And it has diffused a lot of arguments. It has built better communication. It's built the bridge back, because I think a lot of people, all they want to know is that you understood where they came from. You don't have to agree. Yeah, it's a validation. You don't have to agree. You don't have to feel the same way they do, but as long as you can have the empathy to understand where they're coming from, I think that's all.
Well, a lot of people speak to be understood, but don't listen to understand. So that's a major piece of communication, and understanding what somebody's language is, what's their style, what's their preferred, what's their history, what's the context behind how they've historically communicated. I saw a post yesterday too. I love the post, the little memes. They always get you because they're like to the point. I saw one yesterday that said, "You straight." And it gave like different references and it was like 7 different references for how you can say you straight and how somebody will interpret that. Like, you straight? Are you straight? And really just breaking it down. So understanding, if I'm communicating to you right now, let's just say 4, because I use my fingers right now, which is visual and physical communication, that I'm talking about the number 4. But if I just said 4, I could be talking about FORE. I could be talking about FOR. I could be talking about FOUR. There's a lot of different pieces to communication. Body language is 90% of it. So we've got to be able to, language. Text messages screw us up all the time because there's no body language included, and you're
no
just left
tone, nothing.
And you're left to read it and perceive it based on what you already have context for. So if you think you know that person, you're trying to channel their voice and how they would say it when you're reading out that text message, which sometimes is good because you're like, I know exactly how you said that. And then sometimes it's bad because it's like you're assuming and now you're making an ass out of yourself because that's not really how I meant it. Exactly. And if we don't,
and we're making up stories about nothing.
Yeah. And if we don't seek to clarify and really ask for clarification from the person that sent the signal, if I'm sending out the signal to you, you can't go ask Spider-Man what the bat symbol means, because Spider-Man's not going to be able to tell you. But if you go ask Batman, what does the bat symbol mean? You might get some clarity in that answer. And then you might go, oh, well, next time I'll come running because I know what the bat symbol means. But you can't go ask Spider-Man that question. So being able to put things into context like that and helping to, or at the beginning, setting boundaries when you talk to people, understanding, taking time to figure out, like you do a discovery call, figure out who that person is. Are you going to connect? What's your language? What's your style? Will we flow for ebb and glow? You know what I mean? So what is that going to look like? But you've got to get to a place of like really listening to understand a person so that they can be understood. And then you have open communication. And you'll still fail at it sometimes, but then you'll have a relationship that supports you guys fostering new conversations about why something got miscommunicated.
When you're coaching your clients through like accountability, is there any main topics that they're coming to you about?
Main topics,
like
about
any similar themes of like people struggling with?
Discipline. Definitely.
In where? Just like procrastination with work, or like fitness, or?
No, I would actually say self-care. That's like one of the biggest things that I see people like don't engage in. And then they wonder why other systems, like think about yourself as a phone. If your phone battery is consistently low, eventually, no matter how much you charge it, it's going to just die on you consistently and consistently. So people fail to recharge their own personal batteries and then wonder why they're not able to like fuel other things that they're doing, or why there's no success, or why they're not connecting. And really, it boils down to, we've got to put ourselves first. It's a journey that I'm still on, but it's a journey I'm not unfamiliar with. I've done it before. It's just something I'm doing again, but with a blueprint now for a new environment. So a lot of people struggle with discipline. A lot of people actually struggle with identifying goals, being able to say, this is something that I'm interested in. They can come to a goal. They know that, hey, I want to be a millionaire, but they don't know how to create the steps to say, okay, if you want to be a millionaire, let's first break down how much does it, do you have to make a day in order to become a millionaire? If it's $257 a day, or to make six figures, then how long will it take you to get to that $257 a day to then get to the next step, which will get you to the six figures, which will then get you to the million? It's a lot of processes that people are not familiar with, because school just teaches us how to be workers. It doesn't teach us how to be thinkers.
Oh my God. Well, you think back to all the kids that used to get the most in trouble in school were the free thinkers, were the ones that spoke up. I used to get in so much trouble for being such a social butterfly. Like I understood everything the teacher was talking about, and I was kind of bored. I'm like, all right, like social time, like what's everyone else saying? And they hated it. And I'm like, oh my God, like we'll speed it up.
Well, they would have hated us in a classroom together. And like you said,
we would have taught the class.
Oh yeah, like you said, rainbow was your word. Social butterfly was actually written on my first grade report card, and I'm sure my mom still has it somewhere. And the funny part is that was the exact thing I used to get in trouble for. I would do my work. I was an A student. I would do my work, and then I'd have all this extra time where I was like, it's social time, party. Yep. And now everybody else who's not done doing their work, I get in trouble for distracting the class. So I had one good teacher, Mrs. Starr, she's now Miss Farmer, but she was my fourth grade teacher that actually was like, hey, this kid needs something extra to do, and put me into an independent research group where I got to do like other projects and stuff that really like stimulated my mind. But I definitely got in trouble. That was fourth grade. Fifth grade, my teacher couldn't stand me because she used to say Pacific all the time in place of specific.
Oh, I used to drive you nuts.
I was like, I mean, that's an ocean. So, okay. I was a jerk too for kids.
I'm push the line.
Oh yeah, I'm from Massachusetts, so I'm definitely a masshole. So I was in Georgia at this time where I'm like, there's a Southern twang, there's culture shock happening to me, there's social norms that I'm not like accustomed to. There's just a lot that's happening there. So I laugh about it now, and I understand through emotional intelligence, you don't need to correct people and tell them that the Pacific is an ocean in specific, because I'm sure they know what the hell they're trying to say.
I know, but it's so hard not to.
It is. It really is. But you have to, if you're going to do that, this is back to the point that we started off on, you have to be intentional about building relationships with people that allow you to relationally agitate them in ways to bring them to a place of accountability. You know, kids listen to their sports coaches because the coach has built that relationship with the team. They've given them tough love. They've shown them that I'm here for you, but if you screw up, I'm going to hold you accountable. Mm-hmm. And that needs to be seeded over into like an entire paradigm shift for the world, because not every kid's going to be athletically inclined. Not every kid's going to be a mathlete. Not every kid's going to have a social group that they even adapt to. Mm-hmm. What about INTJs, right? Who are like, I recharge by myself, not with anyone else. Right. So what do we do for those people? We set up systems of accountability that they can implement themselves after 6 or 8 weeks of coaching. And then they can go and say, hey, based off of what Coach Bri taught me, I was able to do X, Y, Z. And this is something that is sustainable. I can seed over into other areas of my life. I can use for other goals. I can use for other things that will come across. Now I have this blueprint. So that's what's most essential.
The style you use for your clients and your nonprofits, is that the type of parent you are as well?
So I'm coach at home too. So how Coach Bri actually came about was
you're like Coach Military Bri. It reminds me of Cadet Kelly, that movie.
Absolutely. So I was actually in JROTC before I completely screwed up in high school. I was actually second in command, the battalion executive officer. So I did uniform inspections. Surprised. I was the captain of the drill team. You know, I was on everything, color guard, drill team, everything you could think of. At a point, I was president of student council in like 5th grade. So I've always kind of had a really structured mind, a discipline, and things that I've always worked on for myself. But specifically with my daughter, I've always hated cheerleading. I wanted to be a football player as a kid. My mother was like, no, you're a girl, you can cheerlead and then you can play football. I was like, I'm not doing that. By the time she gave me the okay for football, I didn't want to play anymore anyway. So here comes all these years later, I have a daughter and now she wants to cheerlead. And I was like, what in the hell? But I was working 3 jobs at the time, and I wanted to be able to not just like chuck her off from 8 hours of school during the day plus after school care now over in the cheerleading without getting to spend any quality time with her. So I was not satisfied with the coaching structures, and my mama always told me, don't talk about a problem unless you got the solution. Ooh. So I let my mouth write a check my ass didn't want to cash. I volunteered to coach for them, which led into coaching and coordinating. I did that for about 2 years. My daughter just left the cheer squad this year, but that's actually where Coach Bri came from.
Oh, wow.
And where my acronym for Raider core values came from, because we were the Brockton Raiders. Cool. So respect, accountability, integrity, dignity, empowerment, and resilience are the structures that I teach the youth that I work with. It's what I live off of, and any adults that come my way, I may not break it down to them on a 5th grade level. Obviously, you respect people's dignity and bring things to them where they are, but it's definitely a standard operating practice across the board. And CIA intelligence, which is communication, implementation, and accountability.
Right. Everything that you've been through, where do you think you learned how to navigate it? And clearly you learned to navigate it at home, no matter what you were going to go through. Yeah. If you grow up with 2 entrepreneur parents, like you are watching them go against the grain every single day, and you're going into shit all day, every day. And you're figuring it out. And I mean, such a beautiful situation to grow up in, because yes, you went through hell at 16 years old, 16 and 19, but even as you were going through that, you learned, you knew inherently that it was going to be fine. You were going to figure it out. But what I loved about your story, like every time I chatted with you, is you knew at such a young age how to advocate for yourself. You knew how to research better places to go. You knew how to get yourself into the next thing. And I want you to touch base on like what you were telling me the last time. Like, I remember you telling me like you were able to switch shelters and then like just basically move around. Can you remind me of that?
Yes. So this is the bigger part of the story. So I was the first person to leave the shelter that I was in to full-time state employment. And
which was unheard of, so it's almost like you create these systems and to try to help people like get out of it. It almost seems like majority of people would rather just stay in the situation they're in. So I think they were shocked of watching you being like, no, I got to get the hell out of this. This is not what I want.
Yeah. And I mean, I had fallen into a gray area because I created a
Yes.
5-year plan. I said I wanted to leave the shelter making $30,000. I was pretty much told by some of the people in there that I was crazy because I hadn't had a college education at that point and that there were so many more other qualified people than me. But with that system that I use and that persistence that I have, I was able to essentially take that information and say, to hell with what you guys are saying, and left out of there with a $33,000 salary. However, it did not come without some real adversity during the transition because was I 19 already? I want to say I was
Yeah, I
19
think you
already by the
remember
time I was
telling me that.
leaving.
And basically, it's like you're in that gray area of I'm
Yeah.
almost making like too much money, but I'm not the right age
Yeah.
to still get support. And you just kind of fell into a category that they've kind of
Yeah.
forgotten about.
Yeah. And realistically, it was that I was over the cap for being able to receive public transitional assistance, which is what qualified you and was a requirement to be able to stay in shelter, and particularly teen shelters. I was also under 21, where you can't be placed in an adult shelter until you're 21. And then I had only had the job for 30 days, which meant I only had 2 checks. And for the sake of numbers and really creating a picture for people, that was $999 in one check and $990 in another check. I got a photographic memory, so I remember the very first checks, which less than $2,000 is not enough to have first, last, and security in, a state like Massachusetts, where the rent for a 1-bedroom is at least $1,000 or $1,100. And, they're not renting to somebody who hasn't had any rental history to vouch for them. And you're like, I'm 19. You look like you're just like running away from home and got emancipated or
And
something.
With a daughter. And they're like, oh my God, this
Yeah.
girl's not going to pay rent. Like, I'm not wasting
Yeah.
time here. Even if they care about you and want to help you out, they're just like, I don't even know if you're going to pay the mortgage.
Right. And I don't accept no for an answer. It's never been something that I like understood. It doesn't like register in my brain. No means next opportunity. So that means I now need to move on.
Amen,
and you're saying no, but somebody else is going to say yes. So I found an apartment in 45 days after having someone come and drop keys off on my desk at 3 p.m. on the day that I was supposed to leave out the shelter. I had plans of where I was going to put my stuff and like where me and my daughter would stay for that night or the next few nights, but really no solid plan. But I had done some things on the back end. Faith without works is dead. And I had been calling, the mayor's office, and finally got through to the governor's office, who redirected me and eventually sent in some services to help, like literally an hour before I was set to leave out of there. I now had a place to go. So just always understanding that you are the only person that is responsible for your outcomes. You're the only person that is going to be accountable for the failures that you have, or if you don't look at them as failures and rather just lessons learned, you're the only person who's going to perceive and add context to those things and make them matter for you. So everything that I do has been about, quite frankly, creating a legacy. I know I'm great, and y'all gonna know my name.
Mic drop. I mean, it's again all about mindset. The only person that's going to advocate for you the most is yourself. And if you don't believe you can, no one else is going to waste their time believing you can. As simple as that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I say, just for the sake, because you see, I love to talk in analogies and little rhymes and reasons. And, behind everybody's glorious story, there's a story that led up to where you are. There's an iceberg that people don't see, but they see the large map. Like you gotta be able to write your own story and you gotta be able to tell what you learned out of each thing. I think the biggest piece about being a speaker in particular is I could go out there and just tell stories all day about things that have happened in my life, but what good does that do for people if there's no objective to telling the story and no intended outcome? The objective of sharing these stories with people is to let them know, like, hey, you're not alone. There are people that can relate to you. And then the outcomes will be you followed the things that I said or heard something that inspired you to make a move. And now you were able to change your thought process, shift your paradigm. But without that, there's no purpose in me just talking to talk. Now you're just talking to hear yourself talk.
Yeah.
I speak because I know that there's a story that I can tell that will resonate with someone, that will bring them to a place of wherever it is they're trying to go. I might be the change agent. So,
Let's switch gears briefly before I let you go. I want to talk about, you're obviously putting your resignation into your job. So tell us all what you're going to be spending your time doing. I know you briefly touched on it, but tell us a little bit more.
So I'm going to be spending my time really focusing on securing speaking events for myself. I have a podcast too, Turn Your Stress into Success, that streams on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And I'm really going to be looking to expand that, as well as really focusing in on the organization that stole my heart and took me away from the corporate sector and had me jump off the cliff the first time, which is my nonprofit, and really seeking to apply for grants and acquire some funding for working capital at this time, because we've successfully ran our programs for more than 2 years. And as of this call, we also will be securing a contract with a local school district to provide full-on mentoring services to their student body, which is a high school student body. So that's a major win that I just got those news today as well, getting back on the show. So everything happens for a reason. We were supposed to be here last week, and now we've got more good news to share this week. So definitely just putting myself out there and really spending that 40 hours a week on outreach instead of 40 hours a week for 40% of a pension after 40 years of working.
If we're lucky.
Right.
Remind me again the mission of your nonprofit.
So Resilient Roses Respite Corp strives to uplift and empower youth by facilitating a structured environment to learn the importance of resourcefulness, advocacy, integrity, and dignity, while providing service to the community and uplifting youth voices to empower future leaders.
So essentially what you're saying is you want to empower youth to understand that they have the power to redirect the course of their life, just like you did.
Yeah, we don't get to choose the circumstances that we're brought into this world with, whether it's a silver spoon or hunger. We don't get to make that choice, but we do get to make a choice about what we do with those circumstances. If you've got a silver spoon, leverage it so that you can continue to keep that, legacy rolling for your family. If you don't have a silver spoon, be the person in the family that puts a silver spoon in somebody's mouth and then teaches them how to polish that silver so it doesn't rot getting drooled on. Yeah. So that's what I'm doing. My mom is number 10 of 11 kids, and the only one who made it to college education and made some success, has seen 6 figures in her lifetime, has gotten to travel the world, gotten to live and love. So she broke the curse, and now I'm taking the torch.
Right. And obviously, listening to how incredible your daughter is, it's going to keep going another generation.
Oh yeah, we'll keep that ball rolling. She'll have the spoon. I didn't grow up with the spoon, but we're going to put the spoon in her mouth before 18.
And what I love about that, just as a last thought, so many people are bitter. We'll go back to your analogy. They're bitter that they didn't grow up with the silver spoon, but they do not have it in them to go figure out how to create that silver spoon and start it for everyone else. Because I feel like they sometimes forget, like, anyone that I'm surrounded by that's wealthy, it was only probably 1 to 2 generations before them that created that. Yeah, and it's very possible to create that and have it for your family.
And the same energy you put into talking about your problems need to be the same energy you putting into going and getting it. Talk about what you don't have, go get it. Talk about what your problem is, go solve it.
Yeah. I mean, you said it earlier. Don't talk about your problem if you don't have a solution. Absolutely. Love that. Last but not least, that I want to ask you about, what's all this for? When you leave this earth, not to be morbid, but when you leave this earth, what do you want to be known for?
No, legacy. Be morbid.
I know, but what about the legacy? What about the legacy?
I'm totally not against going into the funeral home service. It's a sustainable.
It's a great business.
Oh yeah, no, seriously, legacy. Like for me, it's.
But legacy be a what? What do you want to be known for? When people talk about you,
for being a great communicator.
Okay.
I want to be known for breaking the barriers of communication and spreading awareness so that people can communicate the things that are most important to them, so that they can really have the tools in their toolkit to be able to build the bridge to a better life. And that's going to start by turning their stress into success. If you don't have any stress, you don't have any tension, you don't have any room for movement. Without being pushed, there's no force. It's like the laws of gravity. So we've got to push ourselves, but a lot of people lack, the tools in their kit to be able to build that bridge. So I'm going to provide those tools and, help to be a great communicator so that other people can communicate the things that they really want in life.
Awesome. And what do you want your daughter to remember you as?
I want her to remember me as her number 1 fan, that nobody is ever going to believe in her more than me other than God.
Yeah.
It's literally nobody else that's going to. I almost died bringing her into this world. She almost died coming in. So there's a reason that we're here, and we got to make it worthwhile. We know about King Tutankhamun because of script and Braille and all this stuff that was written in the walls years ago. I'm making my mark here on this earth because I will not be forgotten.
Mm-hmm. Bri, you leave me speechless. As simple as that. I don't need a list of questions for you because you answered them before I asked them. And speaking of being a great communicator, I mean, yeah.
Thank you.
The last thing that I want to say before I let you go is, as you mentioned earlier, it's very funny when people are brought into your life. And like you said, we were supposed to record last week. And I think the week that happened for both of us allowed this to be even a better conversation. And Absolutely. It allowed us even more topics than we probably would have talked about last week. So I'm a believer that everything happens for a reason. And quite simply, I just want to thank you for your time because it's been very inspirational.
Thank you so much. Make sure your followers, your audience, connect with me on Instagram at Coach Bri Nichols, actually across all platforms at Coach Bri Nichols or CoachBriNichols.com.
Amazing.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.